Woo! Okay, big day today, guys. I got my big water because I don't know if I'm going to be able to stop and take a breath, but I'm definitely going to need some water. I have a ton to cover today. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here with me because I know that you're all suffering. I've been through a lot of the same situations that you guys are currently in. My Facebook messages have been blowing up with gratitude and acknowledgement and just people saying, I feel like you're speaking directly to me. My heart is so full. So I want to start. I have a ton to go over today. Today is the big reveal, I guess you can say, as far as like what's causing all of these mystery illnesses and why we don't have an answer for any of it yet. So I want to start by just restating the fact that I'm definitely not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor. I definitely can't cure your diseases. I am not a licensed practitioner. I am a certified biofeedback tech. I'm a corrective exercise specialist. I've been in the health and wellness industry for over 15 years. And I have seen countless clients go from the state, of brain fog and depression and anxiety and autoimmune disorders and diabetes and all these ailments that, they kind of feel like their doctors failed them on. And so I'm definitely just here to forward the information that I've learned for myself and my own healing journey so that you guys don't have to go through the runaround of the doctors and the homeopaths that I tried. So my goal is to really direct you down the right path and to give you as much knowledge and education that I have. This class is really just a quick 5-day crash course just to kind of like introduce you guys to the information so that you know that there's hope for healing and that you know that this isn't something that is quote unquote incurable like they're saying. So just know that I'm just like you guys. I am a mom. I'm self-employed. I have suffered with the same illnesses that you guys are experiencing now. Fortunately, I'm out of all of that. And I just want you to know that I've been in your shoes. And today we are talking all about the secret behind these mystery illnesses like brain fog, depression, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, hormone imbalances, menopause symptoms, migraines, headaches, hot flashes, insomnia, aches and pains, rheumatoid arthritis, you name it, we are going to talk about it today. And again, my goal for you guys is I definitely want you to participate. Feel free to ask questions. I know a lot of people are hopping on after so that, if they can't catch it live, which is totally fine. So some of the things that I want to talk about are really based around my own kind of journey. And if you know me already, you already know some of this, but a couple years ago, I got out of a really bad relationship. And the deciding factor for me was my health. And I knew I was strong emotionally. I thought I was tough and that I could handle it. But when my body started breaking down, I knew that if I was going to be the best mom and the best version of myself that I could be for my clients and my children, then I needed to take care of it. And it was all stress induced, but I was in pretty serious adrenal fatigue. I had headaches every day. I went into some of the symptoms that I had before, so I won't bore you guys with all the details, but I felt like I was 60 years old and I was 26, 27. And so when I started my journey, I was really looking for an answer. I've always been kind of like a why person. If I went to a chiropractor, I always wanted to know, why are you doing this adjustment? What is this going to do for me? What area does this help? And I've always wanted to know why. So just going to the doctor and then saying, well, you have this or your body can't process this, that was never good enough for me. That was never efficient. And so I started digging deeper and I started looking for answers. And my kind of like my tipping point was when I started having anxiety attacks on a daily basis. And it turned out that I was in adrenal fatigue, but it wasn't just adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is, again, a symptom. It's just a label that doctors in the medical community have kind of put on an ailment that they really have no idea where it comes from. And that's, where we talked about stress before. And so, I had gone through all of the symptoms of what we're going to talk about here today, from joint pain and muscle pain and headaches and insomnia and mood swings and depression and brain fog and memory loss. You guys, it used to cause fights with my ex-husband because I would put my keys somewhere and then I would go do something and then I could not for the life of me remember what I did with my keys or where I put them. And he would be like, again, you know, you really can't keep track of your stuff. And it was always, you know, very condescending. And I remember feeling so just like brokenhearted that like it wasn't my, like I felt like it wasn't my fault. It wasn't something that I could control. And that's what I'm getting from people. There's, you know, like, and you guys checked yesterday, which I was actually kind of surprised about. But yesterday when I did the poll of, you know, who's experienced what's kind of symptoms, you know, lack of motivation was the top one. And it's really sad. It breaks my heart because it's not that we don't want to get better, but there's something inside of our brain that's not turning on to tell us that we need to get better. And so the problem is not even a mindset. It's not a mindset choice. It's not even a choice. But we really need to look at what's causing that. It's a vitamin and mineral deficiency. Is it, you know, an imbalance to, you know, in our organs or in our energy fields? And so part of what we're talking about today is healing, you know, literally your brain so that you can live your life fully and optimally and have a good quality of life. So I think we covered a lot of it: neuropathy, numbness and tingling, fibromyalgia, thyroid and hormone imbalances, restless leg syndrome, insomnia, hot flashes, autoimmune disorders, mononucleosis. And, you know, the way that I kind of found all of this was really, you know, divine intervention and synchronicity. And when I was just about to have my baby, I love being pregnant. My body just, I mean, my body does amazing things for me when I'm pregnant. And I remember I was working with somebody at the time doing biofeedback, and they were experiencing all of these symptoms. And something popped up on my Facebook feed, and I clicked on it, and I literally was like blown away. I was like, holy crap, this is what I've been looking for. And I know every time I pray for something, it shows up and right when I need it. And that is exactly how this information was. And this information, and a lot of you guys may be familiar with this already, and hopefully you're going to hear something today that you haven't heard before, but it was Anthony William, who is the medical medium. And his story is phenomenal. His story is mind-blowing. And the gist of it was that when he was 4 years old, he saw a spirit standing behind his grandma, and the spirit told him to come over and stand behind her and put his hand on her chest and say lung cancer. Long story short, I don't want to, you know, go into this too much, but she had lung cancer. And ever since then, he's been reading and healing people. And the spirit has told him exactly what is going on inside people's bodies. So this isn't science. This isn't science-based. There's no scientific evidence to back up what I'm going to tell you guys. But what I can tell you is that I'm living proof. My mother-in-law is living proof, and she's a nurse practitioner, and she is healing people probably 60% faster by following these protocols. So we know that they're working. And when I had you guys do the timeline, you're going to see how your health has, I guess I can't say evolved, but how your health has diminished over the years. And as you look at these, you know, your stressors and your sicknesses, you're going to see exactly why that is. So I want to make sure that I stick to my notes, but the very first thing that I want to introduce you guys to is where most of these mystery illnesses are coming from. Now, tomorrow we're going to be talking about the sinusitis, the UTI infections, chronic ear infections, stuff like that. But today we're actually going to talk about the Epstein-Barr virus. Now, if you follow the medical medium at all, then you're already aware of this. However, like I said, hopefully you're going to hear some information that you haven't heard before. So the Epstein-Barr virus actually was around in the 1800s, and it was a herpes virus that had morphed into what we now know as the Epstein-Barr virus, because they were messing around with pre-antibiotics. And when they were using the pre-antibiotics, the Epstein-Barr virus started feeding off of the antibiotics. So if you've ever heard that antibiotics are bad for you, or if you've ever heard that you know, you develop a tolerance to antibiotics and that you shouldn't take too much, there's a reason for that, because the viruses and the bacteria will morph around the antibiotic, and it'll create a different strain. So they're not always going to be effective for the same kind of strain. So that's what happened with the Epstein-Barr virus. It was originally a herpes virus. And then around the same time that they were messing around, like in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when they were messing around with the development of penicillin and antibiotics before that, I feel like I might be talking too fast, so hopefully you guys can all keep up, but I get really excited about this. In the 1920s, they also had the boom of pesticides. That was when they really started using pesticides on the foods. So it wouldn't have been a big deal if the Epstein-Barr virus had just mutated into just the Epstein-Barr virus. But what they didn't realize, and what we still don't realize now, is that the Epstein-Barr virus feeds off of heavy metals. So in the 1920s, the pesticides they were using on plants were arsenic and lead based. So you were basically feeding our bodies with these pesticides that are feeding viruses that we don't even really know that we have. It's 2017, we still don't even realize that we have them. So the symptom of the Epstein-Barr virus, even now, people don't recognize it for what it is, but the symptoms didn't actually start showing up until about the 1950s. Now, here's what's crazy, and I've been meaning to post this picture, but there's literally history of something called crazy women's disease, or crazy women's disorder, where they used to check women into psych wards for depression, anxiety, restlessness, insomnia, hot flashes, brain fog, memory loss, confusion. Sound familiar? But they didn't have a name for it then, like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or multiple sclerosis. They didn't have a name for it. And so their developed name for it, thankfully we don't live in the 50s, but their name for it was crazy women syndrome. And the reason for that was because when the boom hit of the pesticides, it took 20 to 30 years for that virus to start mutating and causing these symptoms that even now we're still experiencing. So you think, our doctors are bad by not having enough, not having the knowledge or not having any real answer for thyroiditis or whatever. Imagine living in the 50s and like being checked into a psych hospital having like lobotomies because you couldn't sleep or you were having hot flashes or you were depressed. It was crazy. So that was really the beginning of the symptoms. And now we have all the same symptoms, except we have different names for it. Obviously, in the 60s, they decided that, well, we can't name it crazy women's disease. That's not a very, positive disorder. So we're going to start calling it something else. So around that same time, and I have to make sure that I keep on track with my notes because I don't want to get sidetracked. There's a couple things that feed the virus. So Devon, you're just hopping on. So I'm talking about the Epstein-Barr virus and how it developed, and you can catch the beginning of it later. But when we talked about the pesticides in the 20s feeding the Epstein-Barr virus and causing all these, chronic fatigue and depression and anxiety, all these symptoms, the other thing that they didn't realize that feeds them is hormones. Now, yesterday, the whole video was on stress and stress hormones. So the Epstein-Barr virus will actually feed off of certain types of foods, which we'll get into later, but it also feeds off of hormones. So if you are in a stressful situation, and this is why I had you guys do the timeline the other day, if you're in a stressful situation, the Epstein-Barr virus will actually find the adrenaline and the cortisol and all those stress hormones that you've just released, and it'll latch onto those, and it'll mutate, and it'll develop into a more serious strain of Epstein-Barr. And there's over 60 strains of Epstein-Barr virus, which is still hasn't been developed yet. So how can we cure something, or how can we treat something that we don't even know about? We don't even know is causing the problem. So when I asked you guys to do the timeline yesterday, the point of me doing that was because I want you to look at your stressors and your sicknesses. So for me, the tipping point and you guys, I want you guys to comment if you want to, ask any questions, or if you guys are resonating with anything that I'm saying, definitely feel free to share it. But when I did my timeline, and when I very first started looking into the Epstein-Barr virus, mononucleosis is Epstein-Barr virus stage 2. Now there's 4 stages, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit. But the Epstein-Barr virus stage 2 is mononucleosis. Now mine actually followed a really traumatic, it could be one of 2 things. So I had a really traumatic breakup when I was 14 years old. That was really tough, really emotionally challenging for me. But that was also the time that I started birth control, and I was going through puberty. So you have this influx, this rush of hormones going through your body, and you are already depleted, you're exhausted, you're tired, or whatever. You get run down, you get sick, and all of a sudden the Epstein-Barr virus feeds off of that vulnerability, and it attacks your body, and that's what sends you into stage 2. So stage 2 is mononucleosis. If you guys have ever had it, then you know that you have Epstein-Barr virus in your system. If you have not had mono, there's 2 things that can happen. One, that you don't have it at all, and you're going to resonate with the video tomorrow. Or 2 is that you had a very mild case of mono. Now, my case of mono started out as a sickness, sore throat, fever, chills, kind of, didn't feel awesome. But then it didn't go away. I think I was 15 years old. Then it didn't go away. And then it got worse, and my back hurt, and I was exhausted, and the fever wouldn't go down, and they took me into the doctor, and they ran a blood test, and when the Epstein-Barr virus is active, they can check your blood for the antibodies, and they can see Epstein-Barr virus is active, and that, yes, you have mononucleosis. Well, my mono lasted for almost 4 or 5 months. I'd have to check with my mom, but I remember it being a really long time. So when I had mono, my body was totally depleted. It was depleted emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And I remember being in the nurse's office on a regular basis. So if you guys have had mononucleosis in the past, then you know for sure that you have Epstein-Barr virus. If you don't know that you had mono, it doesn't mean that you didn't have it. It might just have been that you had it for a week and then your immune system kicked it, but you still had it. So with biofeedback, I actually have created a protocol to look for things like heavy metals, radiation, stress hormones, Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue, mononucleosis, streptococcus, and herpes virus, because those are all the things that will show us if you have Epstein-Barr virus in your system. Now, the problem is that we don't have any way of testing for the dormant virus. So if the virus attacks and then it goes and it hides in your liver and your spleen, which is what happens, there's no science right now that can actually prove or test for dormant viruses inside the body. So we have no way of saying, yes, you have Epstein-Barr virus and that's what's causing your diseases. And maybe, doctors are amazing. They do studies and they do research and they get funding for all these things. And they may find that out eventually, but as of right now, the only one that's talking about it is Anthony William and his group of practitioners. And so I'm part of this practitioner group. Unfortunately, I've been able to, learn as much as I can in the last 2 years, but being able to follow these protocols is what's actually healing people from these mystery illnesses. So when in the 1970s and 80s, after the crazy woman syndrome was coined, and they had all these diseases, they decided that they couldn't continue to name it crazy woman syndrome. So any guesses onto what they changed it to? Any guesses as to what they blamed it on? And it was hormones. So, your hormones are off, try this cream, or your hormones are off, go on birth control, or, your hormones are why you're having all these, PCOS symptoms or endometriosis or all these crazy, premenstrual or menopausal symptoms. And so the problem is that these doctors are actually prescribing creams, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen creams that are actually causing you more harm than they are good. If you guys have ever experienced, if you've fallen into that hormone imbalance trend, you know how frustrating it is to try to get your hormones balanced once you start those hormone replacement therapies or hormone creams or pellets or whatever it is. So with the hormone craze, it also started causing more symptoms like fibromyalgia and Hashimoto's and stuff that we didn't have before, and it progressed the Epstein-Barr virus into stage 3. So the reason that it causes so much damage inside our body is because in stage 1, it's active, right? It creates a sickness, it creates a fever, it's just the virus. It's obvious, we can test for it. Stage 2, we can test for it, it's mononucleosis. But around stage 3, after it's been in your system for a while, and it can lay dormant for years until you have a traumatic experience or you have a sickness or a surgery where your body is weak and it can actually attack it again. So when the Epstein-Barr virus is dormant, it actually hides in your liver and it hides in your spleen. And it can do a couple of different things when it happens to your liver, when it hides in your liver. When it hides in your liver, it actually can cause your liver to become sluggish. It can cause your liver to slow down. So you can't eliminate toxins, you can't flush out toxins, but you also can't metabolize your food properly, which is gonna prevent you from losing weight. So if you're not flushing out toxins, and at the same time, the Epstein-Barr virus, when it hides in your liver and your spleen, it feeds off of heavy metals and hormones that are rushing through your bloodstream. So while it's feeding off of these hormones, it ends up, attracting to aluminum and lead and mercury, and it mutates and it grows, it replicates and it duplicates over and over and over and over again. Another thing that happens with Epstein-Barr virus is, and I'm such a science nerd, so I'm trying to stick to my notes so I don't get too like sciencey on you guys. But the Epstein-Barr virus, the lifespan, like what is that freaking word? The lifespan of the cell is only 6 weeks, and at the end of this, which is why it constantly has to duplicate. So at the end of 6 weeks, the cell will actually die off, and it creates a neurotoxin inside your bloodstream that affects your neurotransmitters, causing depression and memory loss and fatigue and brain fog and confusion and all these things that we're dealing with because neurotoxins are poisoning our bodies, are poisoning our brains, and our brain will become sick. So we're talking about, copper, chromium, aluminum, lead, arsenic, like all of these things that are in packaged foods. They're in cigarette smoke. They're in aluminum is in the sky, aluminum foil. They're in pots and pans. So when the neurotoxin gets into the bloodstream and it affects the neurotransmitters, we end up with something that they call, and let me know if this is familiar to you, something that we call overactive nerves. Well, what disease have they made that? I just heard it on the radio just the other day. Fibromyalgia is overactive nerves. Lyrica will help to decrease the symptoms of fibromyalgia. Well, okay, but what's causing the nerves to be inflamed? What's causing the nerve endings to be, what we call overactive? So the neurotoxins that are being released from the Epstein-Barr virus are creating these symptoms like multiple sclerosis, restless leg syndrome, fibromyalgia, thyroiditis, lupus. Hashimoto's is thyroiditis. But when the Epstein-Barr virus mutates and these cells are constantly dying off, if you're not constantly killing it and keeping up with that virus, they're going to continue to morph and grow. So when they continue to grow and they continue to morph, I have to check the time to make sure I get my baby on time. But the medical medium has broke it down into stages. Now, when I started healing, I was in stage 4 of Epstein-Barr virus. Now, I'm gonna start with stage 1, and I'm gonna walk you guys through the symptoms of it, and then just talk a little bit about deficiencies. But stage 1 Epstein-Barr virus really just shows up when your body is exhausted or depleted. Now, the other thing that you need to know is that the Epstein-Barr virus is mostly transferred in stage 2 when it's the most contagious, which is why mono is called the kissing disease. But it can also be passed, so the Epstein-Barr virus can be passed down from your mother, but heavy metals can also be passed down from your mother too. So if your mother was loaded with heavy metals and then you were born and then you got vaccinations and they're loaded with heavy metals, well, so thimerosal used to be mercury, but now they've changed it to aluminum. So they went from one heavy metal to another heavy metal. And so they're still continuously feeding the virus. So when you have the Epstein-Barr virus when you're born and you are exposed to heavy metal toxicity, whether it's in the food that you're eating or in the air or the water, it's also in old pipes, copper pipes that are rusting, and you're getting it in your water source, your food, you're cooking with it. Heavy metals are literally anywhere. They're in aluminum is in most deodorants. I don't even use deodorant anymore. And here's the funny thing: I stunk, and I actually sprayed myself with one of my essential oil sprays before I started this video because I thought you guys could smell me. But in my defense, it's like 120 degrees here today, so I know you can't smell me. But I don't wear deodorant anymore because you're putting aluminum right into your lymph nodes where your skin is moist, and it's going to absorb the most amount of, like anything you put on your skin, your body is going to absorb it. Your skin is your largest organ. So I'm getting sidetracked. So back to stage 1, when your body is exhausted, Epstein-Barr virus will rear its ugly head. And it's going to show up in fatigue, fever, chills, sore throat maybe, and then you fight it off, your immune system kicks in and it fights it off. And then it just kind of goes and it hides out in your liver. And it just kind of chills out for a little while until another traumatic experience happens, which is why I wanted you guys to do that timeline, because I want you to see where your sicknesses were in correlation to your stressors, whether it was a breakup or a surgery or whatever, divorce, your parents got divorced, so they fought a lot. So in stage 2 Epstein-Barr virus, that's when the Epstein-Barr turns into mononucleosis, and that's when the antibodies are visible on a test because they're active. So if you were sick, let's just say you were in college. I just talked to a woman yesterday that messaged me from this class about how she had it in college. And in college, when you're depleted, you're studying, you're partying, you're exhausted, you're not sleeping the way that you should, you're not feeding your body properly. When you are vulnerable and when your body is weak, the Epstein-Barr virus will attack it at that point. Now, mono, like I said earlier, mono can show up for a week or it can show up for 6 months. I talked to another girl that had it back in the, I don't want to date her, but I would probably say the 50s or the 60s. When she had it back then, and she was in the hospital for 3 weeks because of it. So everybody's ability to handle the mono is different. It depends on your diet. It depends on a bunch of different variables, how healthy your home life is, what kind of other illnesses you have at the same time. So after mono, after stage 2 Epstein-Barr, the virus will the immune system will come in and it'll fight it. And the Epstein, and they always say if you had mono, you're not, like I wasn't allowed to jump on the trampoline, I wasn't allowed to wrestle with my brother, I wasn't allowed to do anything super physically active because your spleen becomes enlarged and inflamed and it can actually rupture in serious cases. So the Epstein-Barr virus hides in your liver and your spleen until its next cycle or until it can strike again. So for me, when I was in stage 3 in my early 20s. So looking at my timeline, I could tell where and when that shifted. And that was after I had the birth of my first son. So the Epstein-Barr virus, because it's going to feed on hormones, the most crucial times for these are going to be puberty, pregnancy, after a baby, or during menopause, when your body is the most susceptible to the Epstein-Barr virus. So if you guys think about, when you started birth control and you think about, if you went to college and you started like a Depo-Provera shot or you started a patch or maybe you were doing hormone replacement therapy and you noticed that your symptoms seem to be getting worse instead of better. And I want to do a video about IUDs because let me tell you, those things are dangerous. But any type of birth control where you're feeding your body hormones and or stressful events, stressful environments, work, a shitty work environment or a shitty home environment or a shitty relationship, any of that can cause those stress hormones to feed the Epstein-Barr virus. And all it takes is for your immune system to be weakened or your body to be exhausted and it'll strike again. And when it does, stage 3, the symptoms are sluggish liver, not being able to lose weight, being bloated or constipated. These are more of like the onset symptoms, which is like I was saying I was experiencing when I was 23, but I had no idea what it was at the time. So I had the bloating, I had the anxiety, I had the chest tightness, I had the tension, the muscle pains, the aches. I had been told that I had fibromyalgia, which at that point, I still refuse to accept fibromyalgia as a diagnosis. Fortunately, I'm lucky enough that my clients don't accept that either. But stage 3, end of stage 3, as the virus is morphing and feeding off of these heavy metals, or not morphing, but progressing, this is where it starts to cause autoimmune disorders like thyroiditis or lupus. And you guys, if you have thyroid conditions, I just want to tell you, we're told that our body is attacking itself. And that's such bullshit. Our body has one goal, and that's survival. Our body does amazing things for us just to get us to function on a day-to-day basis. It's never going to attack itself. And so when you hear that, I remember I had a girlfriend that had just found out that she got diagnosed with thyroiditis or Hashimoto's, and she broke down. It was a death sentence. And unfortunately, when we hear those words, your body is attacking itself, we feel betrayed and we feel like we literally, what else can I do? My body's destroying itself from the inside out. Poor me, this sucks. I'm going to die. I'm going to have to live with these symptoms forever. But the reality of it is the Epstein-Barr virus, once it moves out of the liver and the spleen from stage 2, the next place that it goes is to the thyroid. Now, the thyroid is responsible for creating hormones, which is why all of a sudden that throws your hormones out of whack and you either go hyperthyroid or hypothyroid. But the Epstein-Barr virus burrows itself into the thyroid. And when it does that, it's like a drill, and it drills holes all the way down into the thyroid, and the thyroid will become inflamed. And thyroiditis is itis, meaning inflammation of the thyroid. And Hashimoto's was the doctor that coined the term. So Hashimoto's thyroiditis is really just saying that you have an inflamed thyroid. But the problem with the, I want to make sure that I tell you guys the right thing, but with the scar tissue in the thyroid, your body has kind of like this defense mechanism. And so your immune system will go to the thyroid to attack the virus, but they don't understand, doctors don't understand that it's the virus that your body is attacking. It's not attacking your thyroid. It's not attacking your thyroid, I promise you. But it's going into the thyroid to try to attack the virus. And so there are a lot of things that we can do to fight the virus to make sure that we don't have inflammation of the thyroid. And that takes time, and it's natural remedies, and it's food and supplements and stuff like that. And you can take a thyroid medication. They can give you a thyroid medication, but you guys, these medications really aren't designed to heal or cure anything. They're designed to help you with the symptoms of the condition that you're dealing with. So the healing comes from healing the virus. So another thing that's important about the Epstein-Barr virus and, the thyroid and the hormones and stuff like that is that the Epstein-Barr virus and the streptococcus bacteria are like buddies, like they're like roommates. And where the Epstein-Barr virus goes, the strep bacteria can go. And so the strep bacteria will lead to things like, sinusitis and urinary tract infections and bladder infections and tonsillitis and chronic ear infections. And so it's a combination of the Epstein-Barr virus and strep that's causing all these symptoms that we don't fully understand yet. So we talked about stage 1, 2, and 3 Epstein-Barr virus, and now we're going to talk about stage 4. Now, most of the time when I get to people, they are already in stage 4. And stage 4 Epstein-Barr virus is going to affect your brain, your central nervous system, your depression, your neurotransmitters, anxiety, tightness in the chest, vagal nerve inflammation, numbness and tingling in the hands and feet, poor circulation, neuropathy, headaches, migraines. It can contribute to diabetes, chronic fatigue, esophageal spasms. You guys, as the last couple of years, I was so thankful to find this information because I had tightness of the chest. I had heart palpitations so bad that I thought I was going to die and my 5-year-old was going to wake up and find me dead. Because my heart would literally stop and then it would resume really fast and then it would resume its regular pattern. But I used to have trouble swallowing. Like I couldn't swallow. It's like my esophagus forgot how to swallow. This is because the Epstein-Barr virus has totally fucked up your central nervous system. And it's causing all of these symptoms like dizziness and vertigo and tinnitus is ringing in the ears and eye floaters and restless leg syndrome and these overactive nerves that they're calling fibromyalgia. And it's inflammation of the vagus nerve that's causing the ringing that's causing the chest tightness and the heart palpitations. Sometimes we have pain behind the jaw or right under the ear. Vagus nerve contributes to TMJ. And your vagus nerve actually travels from the base of your jaw all the way down to your colon. So it can cause, when you're anxious and the Epstein-Barr virus is flared up, it can cause digestive upset. It can cause shortness of breath, heart palpitations, tightness in the lungs, TMJ, ringing in the ears, like you name it, everything. Asthma, hair loss, shit. I mean, like, does this sound familiar to you guys? Because, like, this is all the shit that everybody's dealing with that nobody has any idea where it's coming from. So, I don't know what my dog's barking at, but I have to wrap it up. But I want to share with you guys that the way that I got into this was my own suffering, and I can promise you that even though it's not science-based, there is so much evidence that this shit is true, legit, and that it totally works. And when you've tried everything else, and the only thing that you have to lose is some money you spent on organic foods and supplements, you don't have anything to lose. You can spend hundreds of thousands of, I worked with a woman that spent over $53,000 seeing chiropractors and prolotherapy and you know, chiropractors and homeopaths and doctors, and she got nowhere. And in 4 months, most of her symptoms had gone away. I mean, this shit is unbelievable. And when I do biofeedback, I'm going to share with you guys some of the pictures of what comes up on biofeedback, because we can test for radiation. We can test for heavy metal toxicity in your blood. We can test for DDT and pesticide sensitivity in the central nervous system. We can test for Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue syndrome, mononucleosis. We can test for all of this with biofeedback. And unfortunately, they don't have a blood test for it yet. And so basically a list of symptoms, which is what we're explaining is stage 4 Epstein-Barr virus, a list of symptoms will pretty much tell you if you have the Epstein-Barr virus or not. And like I said, the only thing that you have to lose is some money that you're spending on supplements and food, which you're going to probably buy anyway, but we want to make sure that it's the right kind of supplement. Otherwise, you're just throwing your money away. And trust me, I've done that. So like I said, I've created this biofeedback protocol and these testing protocols to see, you know, what stage you guys are in, how bad it is, if it's chronic, if it's acute, if it's related to heavy metals, if it's related to hormones. There's so much that we can do, and there's so much healing that needs to be done. And I'm totally here for you guys. I love you all, and I want to help any way that I can. So please feel free to share this video. They don't have to be a member of this group. You should just be able to, you know, tag people in it or share it. And if you have somebody that needs to hear this information, please add them to this group. And on Friday, we're going to be talking about things that you can do for the Epstein-Barr virus and to help start to get your symptoms to go away. I know I flew through that. I'm from New England. We tend to talk fast and we're very blunt. So if you can't keep up, I apologize. I can try to slow down, although I probably won't be successful. So I love you guys all. I hope that this helped. I hope that this is eye-opening for you. And I look forward to tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about all the itis conditions. And then Friday, we're going to talk about hope for healing. So I hope to see you guys all there. If you want to head over to my Facebook page is Kara Cates, just like my name in my profile. And then if you want to check out my website, it's www.correctiveexerciseaz.com. And you can go on there and you can read all about biofeedback and how it works. So I hope that this helps you guys, and please feel free to shoot me any questions that you have. All right, take care.